Welcome everybody to community call number 24 with EthStaker. We are hosting the Protocol Guild today. We have Trent Van Epps and Tim Beiko with us here. We also have the rest of EthStaker. We have Remy, Superfizz, and Vedika, Nolan, and Buddha, and myself, Nick Sorakish, and Thorsten Behrens. We're going to go through today and talk about the Protocol Guild and what it has to do with staking, or what it potentially could have to do with staking. And then we're going to ask some logistical questions about what the Protocol Guild is, how it currently functions, what its kind of roadmap is. And then we will wrap up and tell you about future EthStaker things that are happening. Fizz, could you fill us in on what EthStaker is and why we're having a community call today?
Yeah. So EthStaker is, I guess you would best describe us as an informal organization of staking advocates. And so I think me and Buddha and Nolan maybe started it 2019 or 2020. I don't really remember. And since then, we've kind of onboarded a bunch of people to help us advocate for healthy decentralized staking on the Beacon chain. We are kind of like representatives of the staking community. And so that's our big picture. That's our mission. And it has really worked out well. Like we have a hardened group of people who are doing that good work now, and I'm very proud of where we're at.
Cool, thanks. Just to kick us off, Trent and Tim, can you guys introduce yourselves and sort of give context about who you guys are? Maybe start with Trent.
Sure. So I've been in the Ethereum community for a few years now and working at the EF since last March. And I work with Tim mostly on network upgrade, coordinating, for example, the merge. I worked on that. I also worked on 1559, largely around the areas of who needs to be engaged in this decision-making process. How can we bring the community into it? How can we make more people aware of it? Things like that. A lot of trying to get different overlapping interests to coordinate and make network upgrades happen. So that's what I do and have been doing at the EF for the last year and a half-ish.
Cool, thanks. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, surprisingly similar. So also at the EF, the main thing I do there is I run these core developer calls that we have every 2 weeks. And then I spend a ton of my time trying to explain what happens in these calls to the community in different ways. And beyond that, I try to figure out what are things we can do to help support and support core developers, get new ones to join. So spend some time on things like Protocol Guild or, for example, the Protocol Developer Fellowship that we have at the EF to, try and make that a good place to be working.
Nice. So can one of you guys fill us in on what the Protocol Guild is?
Sure. So there's the first order goals, and then there are a couple of second order goals. The first order is the Protocol Guild is a membership organization of Ethereum core contributors that maintain a registry of that membership on chain. This is pretty basic. It's just a list of people, an address, Ethereum address associated with them, and a weight that goes along with it. We can get more into later, like the addresses, how we do curation, the weights associated with each address. But for now, it's just, you can think of it like literally a contract that stores a list of core contributors and some sort of weight associated with them. So that's the first order goal, or like the objective of what this thing is. And if it's not doing this, it's probably not working well on these other goals. And so when we have this registry, this on-chain list of core contributors, whether they're researchers, client contributors, people like Tim and myself who do coordination work, or a couple other edge cases, when they're part of this membership or this registry that's on chain, it allows there to be a much broader ecosystem-based funding of public goods, specifically centered around the core protocol. And Fizz, you just said something that made me smile, because I realized the parallels is that EthStaker is focused on, I forget your exact wording, but it was something to the effect of focused on the health and decentralization of the staking community. Protocol Guild is very much operating in a parallel adjacent space of we want to ensure there's sustainable, healthy, long-term funding for the core protocol outside of, the pre-mine from the EF, for example, or larger institutional corporate players. So it was very cool to realize that there's some parallels. So I'll just summarize really quick, and then Tim can maybe jump in and cover some stuff I missed. So the first goal of Protocol Guild is to maintain this list on chain. Second order goals are getting the broader ecosystem to participate in core protocol funding, building norms around this, making sure people are aware of this mechanism, that it's legitimate in their eyes, and that they can actually participate in funding the core protocol. Because to date, there hasn't really been a mechanism that can accomplish this. There's a bunch of individual Gitcoin grants. The EF runs its own grants program and has partnered with the EthStaker to do QF rounds, but there are limitations with all of these different mechanisms. So what we're trying to do with this is provide a mechanism that provides a really high signal for the broader ecosystem to participate. Tim, fill in on anything I missed.
No, yeah, I think that's a pretty good description. I think, and maybe, like going back to the rationale is just, we have all these applications that are building on Ethereum, and they want Ethereum to be like a solid place to have their application kind of dependent on. And because of that, you want to make sure that people who maintain Ethereum are like the best people, and they're incentivized to doing it. And right now it's kind of weird, because if you work for like a client team or like on core protocol research or stuff like that, you basically kind of forego a lot of the upside you would get if you say joined a DeFi protocol or something like that, where you would get like a large part of your salary through something like tokens. And that creates like an incentive for all of the best people working on the protocol to instead move like farther up the stack. And that's really bad, because it means, if long term there's no incentive to maintain the protocol, then all of these applications that have a pretty critical dependency on Ethereum lose all of the most talented maintainers that could help kind of literally maintain this dependency. So I think Protocol Guild is like a neat way to align incentives there, where like projects building on Ethereum can contribute to Protocol Guild. And that means all of the people that like work for the protocol can receive some of the upside that they would get by going to work at the app layer, but not having to do that move, and they can kind of stick around and maintain Ethereum.
Yeah, so the first order, I'm overusing those terms, but basically primary goal is like maintain this list to enable funding to come to it. And then as a result of getting this broader ecosystem funding in a bunch of different forms, there will be hopefully we can rebalance some of the incentives to work on a layer 2 or something with a token like Tim mentioned. If the broader ecosystem is participating in funding this mechanism in the core protocol, it will hopefully rebalance some of those incentives.
So how long has the Protocol Guild been up and running so far?
So I'll go like from the very start. October last year was when the discussion kind of coalesced again. This has been a long-term discussion in the Ethereum community of like, how do we properly incentivize working on the core protocol? What does this look like in the next year, the next 2-year, 5-year time horizon? It's been a discussion that's come up time and time again over the years. And again, it came up October. Danny Ryan's contributions to the discussion was, okay, what if we just make this a norm for every project to contribute, let's say 1.5% of their initial token to something like this. He basically laid out the rough idea of what Protocol Guild is, and people were like, okay, sounds like an interesting idea, but obviously we had to flesh it out. So that's what we did over the next few months. Tim, myself, a bunch of other people were engaged, a lot of core contributors. We framed out what the idea of this could be through the end of the year, published a blog post, and then spent the next few months figuring out like, okay, now that we've got this idea fleshed out, what do the smart contracts look like? So from like January to May, we kind of went through a bunch of different smart contract designs, and figured out what the best fit would be. We were using 0x splits for the pilot. It's just a protocol for splitting on-chain assets between a group of people according to certain weights, like any other split works. But we worked with them specifically to add a vesting component. So that was January through May, and then in May we actually launched the protocol. So that's the official launch of it going on chain. But there's been a bunch of work and research leading up to that moment. So then from there we went to a bunch of different DeFi protocols and fundraised about 10 million USD from these larger ecosystem projects. Let's see if I can get them all. Lido, ENS, Uniswap, Moloch DAO. Just before Moloch DAO was announced DAO. So we wanted to bootstrap the project with these really well-known and positive contributors to, we wanted to start with good projects that people recognize. And we were really very fortunate that these the governance forums were really receptive to the ideas that we were putting out there. So from May until maybe August was when we were doing fundraising. And then we reached our goal for the pilot, and now all of those funds are vesting on chain for a year. And then it'll go until next May is when we consider the end of the pilot. But that's sort of the origin of the project.
Hey, can I ask? I'm aware of Stateful Works and I'm aware of Protocol Guild, but I've never quite understood the relationship. Can you help me plug those together? Or if they are, I don't know, maybe they're not plugged together.
Yeah. Stateful Works is more focused on like producing sometimes artistic projects. For example, the Beacon book was more of an artistic project, but it also had some ethnography or more academic interests of like, what's a survey of the core dev community at this time, like a snapshot. And I think we did originally use the Stateful Works Twitter for some announcements early days when we didn't have any of that stuff stood up. But now they're completely independent. But yeah, we had originally used. So if somebody's confused and thought they were the same organization, they are not.
I didn't think they were the same. I had trouble. I didn't know if they were still related or.
Sure.
I definitely get the idea that you use it as a launch pad and now they're separate. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think even the announcement blog post is on the Stateful Works blog, so we should move that at some point.
So I'd love to get into the specifics. When you first launched in May, how was membership determined, and how have you seen it change, and how did the weighting, how did people get weighted? And also, is it all individuals, or is it projects as well?
It is all individuals, but I'll let Tim take it if he wants to. The question of like, how do we decide eligibility?
Yeah. So, at a high level, we want people there who are spending most of their time maintaining L1, like the L1 protocol directly. So what we did to start is we reached out to basically all of the client teams and research teams who were kind of the first logical contributors, and invited them to join. Not all of the people on those teams wanted to join, by the way. Like some of them were either skeptical or I don't know, didn't like it. So we definitely didn't like force it, and it's an opt-in thing. But once we had like that initial set of member, and I think we had like about 90 people, if I remember correctly, when we started. Then we started discussing like, yeah, okay, how do we actually add people to this thing? And there's a few things there. So the first criteria is we want people to have been contributing to L1 directly, like for at least 6 months, just because this is kind of a long-term thing, and we want to make sure that the people that we bring in and kind of go through the overhead of adding, have them like some work and have some work to show for it. So generally what we do is we require somebody who is already in Protocol Guild to be kind of helping with that nomination. So at least one person out of those initial 90s should think that this is a good candidate. And then they should try and like point to their work. So whether this is just like a GitHub with some of their PRs, or if for whatever reason GitHub PRs is not the right format, something else. But there should be like some public part of their work that's visible. And then what we ask for is others to kind of review that and raise any objections, and have at least some like review by somebody who's not on your team. So if you're like from Nimbus and you propose one of your colleagues from the Nimbus team, there should be at least somebody who's not employed by Nimbus who like reviews and doesn't go over like every single PR you've written, but say this person works on Sync for Nimbus, somebody from Nethermind will be able to look at that and say like, okay, this is actually, some Sync code for an Ethereum client. And that's roughly the process. And there's a couple neat things from there where like, when you add someone to Protocol Guild, you're kind of diluting yourself and everybody else, right? Like, so there is like a kind of some friction there that you want the person to be like good enough that, you're willing to give them part of your share and have them join. But then there's also the opposite thing where like, say Protocol Guild did not accept, anybody new and it becomes some sort of cartel, then like literally no project will want to donate to it because people will be complaining on Twitter that they're rejected all the time. And I think, we've had to work through like a bunch of edge cases of like, people who say like work on a DevOps team and like, are they part or not part, or people who don't work for like a client team, they have like a full-time job doing something else, but they do make valuable contributions. How do we deal with them? And this is kind of why we wanted to have this pilot first before launching it as like a really long-term thing, so that we can have kind of these conversations and get to resolutions on them and kind of build up these norms before scaling things up too much. And in terms of just like voting and whatnot, we follow kind of how client devs decide things for Ethereum. Like there's no formal vote. It's really around like rough consensus. So, if anyone has an objection, they can raise it. If people think that, something feels weird and whatnot, we'll talk about it. And I think over time, it's it's like a good way to like grow things and get kind of some amount of cohesion within our Protocol Guild. And I'm pretty stoked. Like we've added a bunch of people. I think we're like at 130 now, more or less. But we've also removed people, which is like the other part of the process. Like, so if people stop working on this stuff, can you actually remove them? And we have managed to do that. And to me, that's like a really healthy thing where, some people can like, you don't want people to just be like a drag on Protocol Guild if they've left and like, we don't have the processes to actually kick them out if they're no longer contributing. So, yeah, short answer. So rough consensus, you need to have somebody vet for you in the guild. And then we ask that at least one person who's not on your direct team gives it a sanity check to make sure that, the Nimbus team or the Nethermind team are not all colluding to add people from the Protocol Guild.
Cool. Are there cohorts or?
One thing I'll add really quick is that there's this members curating themselves is what makes it so different from other projects that might be like aiming to get public goods funding. Because it's self-curated or member curated, I'm pretty confident that this would be like currently the highest signal core protocol funding mechanism that there is today. Obviously, there's still other people who should be members who aren't, or maybe some who are still on the membership who should be removed. But I'm pretty confident that this is the highest quality one, and we're going to keep pushing for it to improve even more in the future. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay. Are there cohorts, or is it just as people are nominated?
Well, we add as they're nominated, but we only update on chain a couple of times a year. So it's like, I think it's like 3 months or 4 months or something. So there might be a lag between when you're added and when you're actually included on chain.
Do distributions also happen like in discrete time periods, or is it continuous?
So yeah, now we're getting into the weeds. And the contract architecture might change for the longer lived version. So, but how the pilot works today, when you send money to the vesting contract, that money then vests over a year with a snapshot of like that money then vests over a year, but every block part of it becomes distributable. What distributable means is we can then send whatever has vested to all of the recipients on Protocol Guild. And we use a splitter contract to do that, which keeps tracks of everybody's shares. So like every block, anybody can distribute the funds to the split contract, which then Protocol Guild people can withdraw from. So it doesn't send it directly to their address. People from Protocol Guild actually need to like claim that withdrawal. But that's permissionless to do. So like you can go on the website and click on it and pay the gas fee to distribute everybody's tokens if you want to. So what we then do is right before we update the split, we will do a distribution of everything that's vested, so that we're sure that like the funds have been distributed, and then you update the split with the new weights, and so from like the block after that, basically the vesting keeps happening on the existing set of tokens, but the claim to those tokens changes because the split contract has updated weights. Does that make sense?
Mhm. The Protocol Guild Twitter posted this image that I just posted in the Zoom chat. Maybe Beiko could share it. I would love some sort of explain like I'm five of that image. It's Protocol Guild V2, and then there are 4 bullet points. Is this so? This is the core, the meat of how it works.
How it will work. Yeah, I just explained the
Okay.
simple. I just explained V1.
Okay.
This is what we're trying to go for. Trent, I don't know. Do you want to maybe explain what's bad with V1 and why we're trying to make it better with
Sure.
V2?
Yeah, I'll give the TLDR version. So the V1, and there's actually a similar chart in the docs if you go to protocolguild.readthedocs or whatever the URL is. But that it lays it out like in excruciating detail exactly the smart contract functions that somebody would have to go through. But the big summary is that splits are currently, they require basically a permissioned party to update, or you have to delegate control of the splits to somebody. And because it's a V1 and we were optimizing for launching, there's a 6 of 10 multi-sig that controls updates. Obviously, this isn't ideal for something that we have pretty high aspirations for. We want it to be as legitimate and as trustless as possible. So a Gnosis 6 of 10 isn't going to cut it long term. So that's what this illustrates, is we want to start to use, or we want to string together some off-the-shelf, as much off-the-shelf contracts as we can. So this diagram shows how we could possibly use a Moloch DAO contract, which is just one member, one vote, and then they can control this middleware contract, which then feeds into the split. The middleware contract would be called a shaman. Basically, it's we're trying to remove this dependency of a multi-sig. That's the short answer. And then there's some other ideas about like how do we expand onto L2s. We're looking at some different projects that could possibly help us there. But that's the basic summary, is that we want to not have to use this multi-sig long term.
So embedded in this is also is it embedded in this that you're also looking for different ways to fund the Protocol Guild?
We always are. And that probably brings us to like the EthStaker discussion part of this, of like, what does this actually mean? But yeah, so when we had originally started, just to give some context, we had started talking about this, and like the inspiration for the project was like, oh, projects should give a % of their token, which makes sense. But obviously, once you start getting into it, there's a lot of nuance. Like a project that's already launched, like Uniswap, probably isn't going to donate 1.5 or anything close to that of their token supply. It's much easier to make an ask like this to a project that's just starting out, for example. So that's one thing that we've learned, is that this blanket request, or even trying to build the norm around this, isn't going to work for everybody. And then the other thing to consider is that not every project is going to have a token. They might have recurring revenue that they want to contribute. So like as we've started to flesh this out, we've learned there's a lot of different ways that projects can contribute beyond just like this flat 1.5% of a token. And yeah, that's one of the main reasons, like throughout the pilot, we want to start engaging and learning from different communities to figure out what is the best fit for each one. And yeah, I don't know how you want to frame the discussion, or I'll let you decide how to talk about it. But EthStaker and the staking community feels like a really perfect compatible partner for funding something like this, given just the close relationship between core protocol and the people who are building it.
I love this model for any protocol, only because like models that are starting to get bootstrapped, or protocols that are starting to get bootstrapped that are new, it's so mutually beneficial for them to say something like, we're just getting started and we plan on being for profit, but we also are going to fund the Protocol Guild, which is going to add contribute back to the protocol and to the ecosystem in general,
And it's
regardless
worth
of.
noting, I just thought to jump in there. Like one thing I like with Protocol Guild is we make it pretty easy. So like Element Finance tried to do something like this, and shout out to them. And they wanted to reward like core protocol contributors. So they had this whole thing where like they scanned all the repos on GitHub. They made like a ZK process to, like go log in with your GitHub IDs, generate a ZK proof that you could map to like an ETH address to not like dox your ETH address, and I had to like develop all this software, all these contracts, run this process to effectively do like what Protocol Guild is doing, where like we just give people like an ETH address that they can, send money to and like know that it's all going to happen in the background. So I think that's like a big part of, if you're launching a new protocol, you're launching a new token, like you might want to give back, but like you shouldn't have to spend like months of like developing customized contracts to do that.
It's also there's a lot of value to having a neutral middleman for doing that. Somebody who, middleman's a bad word for it, but somebody who is not biased towards any one protocol or any direction.
Right. Yeah.
Right, and because it's self-curated, you don't have to deal with any intermediating organization. It's the members putting out this claim about the membership, which if that's not high signal, then I'm not sure there's something that could be closer. Because whenever you get into these situations where there's like some external council which is deciding eligibility or some other organization, as soon as you start to introduce distance or some sort of separation between the ultimate beneficiaries and who's curating the beneficiaries, you lose some of the signal. Like it's a little lossy.
All right, let's say I'm a staker and I want to contribute to Protocol Guild. How do you guys would see that contribution? Like, what would be the logistic of it?
So Tim could probably jump in on like the exact specifics, but so today transaction fees and MEV are available to stakers. And obviously we're sensitive of when we're having this conversation, given that withdrawals still aren't enabled and the merge only just allowed some access to funds. So like we want to treat this not as like we're like shaking a collection basket, but we're more like just opening the discussion about, okay, what actually does make sense? How is the best way for stakers, solo stakers, institutional stakers to actually engage with something like this? So yeah, that's the big disclaimer. We're interested in learning and not like extracting funds from the community. But go ahead.
At this point, it's more like retroactive funding because
Sure.
it's already been built. People are already using it, and you're saying, "Hey, we built this. It's already live."
Yeah. So like to get into the nitty gritty, stakers could set. So what we are like rough thinking about this is stakers could deploy a split contract that sends some % of whatever their funding is, so transaction fees, for example, or MEV. They could send 95% to themselves, whatever their typical withdrawal address is, and then they could send 5% or whatever % they wanted to the Protocol Guild vesting contract or the split itself. There's some nuance there, but that's generally like, okay, the simplest way is to just set up a split if you wanted to participate. That being said, everybody's situation is different. There might be a different approach for an institution or like a shared pool like Rocketpool or something. But that's like the initial idea, and then maybe this changes when withdrawals come out and there's a more efficient way to set up a split contract. But I'm rambling at this point. Tim, do you have anything to add?
No, sorry.
So I really like this this idea of a split contract. I'm not sure all the stakers right now would be able to do that on their own. So maybe if you could provide some template of smart contracts.
Yeah. I think that's actually a great point. So basically what you would want is, we use 0xSplit. We like them, but like you don't have to use that. But shout out to them. They did a lot of work to make this work, and it's pretty cheap. But basically there's even a UI for 0xSplits. So what you can do is like you go on the website, you plug in your, say you wanted to give 1% of your staking rewards to Protocol Guild. You would create a split contract. You put your ETH address, set it to a weight of 99, and then put Protocol Guild's address and set it to a weight of 1. And then you just click create, sign the transaction, and that'll give you like an ETH address as well. That's the address of the contract, and that's all you need to do. That's the thing you would plug in as your withdrawal credential. So if you're a validator today, there's probably two cases you can be in. One is where you already have like ETH1 credentials, like a 0x01 withdrawal credential. If you're in that case, you can't really change it. Like you'd have to like exit your validator and come back in to do this. There's no way to change a 0x1 credential to another one, as far as I can tell. But if you're like an earlier validator and you have a BLS credential for your withdrawal key, so a 0x00 credential, then to process withdrawals, you're going to have to do an update to go from 0x0 to 0x01, because otherwise, basically, the system doesn't know where to send your money to. As you do that, then you could choose to plug in this address for this splitter contract you created. That's good feedback. Like I think we can add a page in the docs about how to do that and you know, add some screenshots. But it's really easy with the 0x splits UI. Honestly, like you just put in the two addresses you want, their share. As long as the shares add up to 100%, it'll let you create the contract. And then you can use that contract address and send funds to.
It's mutable.
Right. Yeah, that's true. You can. Yeah. So you can if you're not sure. That's it. That's a good point.
What about a relay hosted by you guys? That's the easiest way you could get a cut, I guess.
Oh, you mean like Flashbots relay? Or sorry, just
if you just take the MEV, if you just forward MEV profits to the guild, so users don't have to change anything on their end, they just plug in the relay.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Probably not a good fit for these early days, just because we're optimizing for as little, so there's no protocol guild budget. There's no organization in the more traditional sense. Like there's no legal entity. There's no all of the vesting streams basically they go directly to the individuals that are working on this stuff. So there's no like 10% goes to the protocol guild organization for, you know, operations and stuff. It literally 100% goes to the membership and the weights that they have. So I could see that at some point in the future there would be one. Or are you suggesting that we talk to other relays?
Actually, both. I was about to say this, the latter, that maybe Flashbots can just forward a percent to the protocol protocol guild. I think that's the easiest way.
Yeah, I think if you do that, you definitely want it to be opt-in. So like one thing I don't want people to feel like, you know, they're like forced or like bullied into like donating to protocol guild. Like I think, you know, it's like a really good mechanism for people who want to give back to do so. You know, if Flashbots relay told me tomorrow they made it as an option, I think that would be good. If they silently made it the default for everybody, I would be like a bit uneasy with that. Yeah.
It's interesting. I was just thinking, like, I wonder if you guys could incentivize stakers to contribute by giving them some sort of like say in the governance process. But I assume that now that I'm thinking about that, that would introduce all sorts of problems.
Yeah, stakers already have like a massive weight in the governance process in the sense of like they're the first customers of the protocol and their input is super important. So yeah, I don't know if we could make stakers more engaged than they already are, because it's already like really heavily weighted.
Yeah, stakers are, I think, the most engaged people in the protocol already.
Exactly.
It is worth noting also the EF has given like literal validators to all the client teams to run, and they need to keep them running with high like performance, otherwise they don't get the money. So like all the client teams are stakers, and you know, quite literally have like significant grants, you know, riding on like can they like provide good software to do this. So they are like very attuned to changes there, because you know, it's not like they're just building this software for other people, but they don't have any money on the line. Like I think those grants help them have skin in the game as well.
What about like eventual roadmap, if stakers could choose sort of like where their, like who the recipients of their funds were, if they could opt in with some sort of like custom weighting.
Oh,
I mean, they can, right? Like you could do this today. You could, imagine,
Sure, yeah.
You're creating a split and like, I don't know, say you don't like Prism and Lighthouse, but you love Lodestar and Nimbus. You can just say, look, I'm going to create a split with like my address and then Lodestar and Nimbus, and that's it.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So, and like, again, I think it's fine. Like, a lot of these things have like stuff like Gitcoin grants, they'll get grants through a bunch of other funding sources. Like, I think that's totally reasonable, and we don't want like Protocol Guild to stop that. But I think if you're like not sure, you're not very opinionated about it, and you just want to like generally contribute back to like the whole set of people that like maintain Ethereum and not have to worry about how it changes, right? Like imagine, I don't know, you love Lodestar today, but like in 6 months they drop their client. You don't want to like have to follow that. This is kind of the problem Protocol Guild fixes. But if you just want to give it all to Lodestar or to like Nimbus or Aragon, like that's possible also with 0x splits.
Cool. So the way that you guys were talking about was the 0x splits, is that basically going to be immediately available for stakers to do post withdrawals, or is there some sort of infrastructure?
Oh, you can do it today. If you spin up a new validator today, you could go on 0x splits, create your, your like 99 to 1 split between you and Protocol Guild, and you'd get like your transaction fee sent there, right? So there's, withdrawals, like doing it for the withdrawal credentials is how you would ensure that the partial withdrawals kind of credited there. But if you have a new validator today, you can launch it with that as a fee recipient. Even an existing validator, you can literally change the fee recipient whenever. So you can do that. The only thing you can't do is if you already have a 0x, like an ETH withdrawal address, you can't change it to a different one. But if you want to use it for a free recipient, if you're spinning up a new validator, or if you can do that today. And if you have a 0x00 withdrawal credential, as soon as Capella activates, you can change it to this split contract as well.
Do you guys have any guides?
No, we should.
We actually did, and I sent it to Superfizz a couple weeks ago. And that's what you look through it. It's fine. But that's what predicated this call, because he had some questions. He was like, okay, wait, what does this actually mean? And we realized we had written this guide already without actually talking to the people that might be using it. So I guess we could just share it just after this call. But yeah, we do have something written up with screenshots that walks you through it. But at least wanted to start with like this, just an open discussion and introduction of what Protocol Guild is before we're like, making our extractive demands.
We'd love a guide posted in like EthStaker or in the subreddit or Discord.
Awesome. I guess we could just put it right in the docs, and then it's there for everybody to see.
Perfect.
I didn't ignore you. I didn't ignore you, did I, Trent?
No, and you looked through it and you responded. Yeah, you're totally fine.
I worried that I dropped the ball because I don't have a memory of it right now, but I believe that it happened.
Memory completely wiped.
This is the happy case where you forgot, but you actually did the work, so you're off the hook.
Does anybody else have any questions for Trent and Tim?
Not a question, but I think like until withdrawals happen, I believe stakers won't change their withdrawal credentials to anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think going the relay route or setting a fee recipient will be the option until then.
I would really echo that. Like,
sure,
it is, especially for like the community that we've developed. They are, many of us are people who may not be that technical, but we got it done once, and we're like, I can update if I have to, but I don't want to do anything that could risk breaking something. But if it's external, if it's through MEV or whatever, then I feel very confident that, especially like, people love to hit a big MEV block, and that's the time that they're like, yeah, I'm glad to share with Protocol Guild then. That really does make sense.
When I first set up my staking,
totally get that.
Yeah, when I first set up my staking rig, I was updating it all the time, and nowadays I only mess with it if something is wrong.
Yeah,
So I do feel like you have to like hit people either when something like when the merge happened, everybody had to update their rig, and so like there are these like set times where everybody pays attention. As engaged as stakers are, they're not
Like
full time.
Chapella, right?
Yeah.
So Fizz just shared something that he mined a block, but it was a Rocketpool block, which then gets me to a question of, have you guys been reaching out to those kind of liquid staking protocols to say, hey, do you want to, you know, since you're already getting everything to you, you know, do you want to divert 0.5% or whatever to us?
Yeah. So first of all, you know, shout out to Lido, who was like the first contributor. Like they've done this. I think staking pools are interesting because if their staking token, like their governance token, is an actual claim on the treasury, then like basically a fee token, then they can just send that token to Protocol Guild, and that might be like simpler, right? Like if you know, and this is basically what Lido did, and I think from their setup, it makes more sense to do that. I think if for whatever reason that's not the design of the staking pool, then sure, like, you know, you can also choose to send, you know, something like 1% of like the rewards or whatever through the pool directly. But I do think like it's kind of neat, like staking pools have this extra degree of freedom if they have a token that like might actually be easier technically, and just say we give, you know, 1% of the tokens is equivalent. We have had other protocols though, like stuff like DeFi protocols or even like L2 sequencers who like mentioned these types of things as well, where it's like if you're like a, you know, a DeFi protocol that earns some fees, then you can maybe direct part of the fees to Protocol Guild. If you have like an L2 sequencer, you can do kind of the same thing. So we're open to everything. Yeah, there's no wrong way to donate.
I love the attitude here of like, you're laying the foundations. You're knowing, you're thinking as people begin to ramp up, as staking becomes hardened and enshrined, that you want people to kind of like have that memory spot for, hey, I should also put something in there for Protocol Guild. That I love the approach to that. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so it's going to take a while, touching back on what Nick said about like, once you've got your setup good, you don't want to mess with it. It'll take a while for this to percolate out, people to get comfortable with the idea, understand like, what the heck is this new organization? Why should I trust it as a legitimate representative of core protocol? That kind of thing. So yeah, we're starting early. This is a long-term project. Our pilot itself was 1 year, and after this, we're going to move to 4-year vesting cycles. So we're very much interested in this being around for a long time, and that's part of like just getting the ecosystem aware and engaged in it. Is also a long-term project. So like others have mentioned, it's going to take a while to really build up that funding streams and get people comfortable with it. And just a smaller point, we did actually talk to Rocketpool earlier in the year, I think over May or June or something. And we had started the discussion about like, okay, what if Protocol Guild ran and I think it's called oDAO, the Oracle mechanism. But again, it's like Protocol Guild we don't run any infrastructure on our own. It's sort of like this, what does Balaji say of like a network, kind of like a network state, but like a network org. Like it's just kind of floating there as a registry contract. We don't have any infrastructure in the real world.
Do you know the progress on this? There's progress on this. Anthony Sassano is up for vote as an Oracle DAO member, and his intention is to route his earnings to the Protocol Guild. So that does sort of make that happen.
Anthony is he's on top of our GOAT leaderboard right now.
And I'm not committing for him. That's my understanding of what he said. So I don't want him to feel like
he already committed.
He said he's donating all of his ETH to Protocol Guild. That's right? Yeah. Okay.
I might like this method.
And his future ETH as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, his dollar cost of averaging for Protocol Guild.
We're in the Wells.
Plus 10% of the earnings of his descendants onto the third generation.
Is this an effective altruism joke?
Yeah, it would only be fair.
All right. If Nobody else has any comments, questions?
Yeah, I mean, I could just wrap up with, unless there are questions. Sorry, I'm jumping in.
Sounds like you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like just to reiterate, like this is a long-term project. So the pilot was 1 year, funds vest for 1 year, so they'll go a little bit beyond the May 23 cutoff. But the next thing we're looking forward to is what happens after the pilot. So we will take all the learnings, summarize them. We've got a list of questions that we want to address, like, did this incentivize core devs to stick around? Did it incentivize new ones to join? So we'll do some like interviews with as many of the members as we can, compile all these results into a report, just so we're keeping ourselves accountable and actually documenting what the organization is, how it learned, how it evolved over the past year or so. And then we'll release it as a substantial report, just summarizing everything we've learned. So that'll happen around the time as we're coming to the end of the pilot. So that'll be May of next year. Expect to see something like that. And then right now we're already looking to the future. So we touched on like what Protocol Guild V2 is going to look like. How can we expand? How can we get contracts across the expanded EVM universe to L2s, things like that. And we're already starting to fundraise. Obviously, like talking to EthStaker is part of this. We want to build up not just from 10. We had 10 million for the pilot. For the post-pilot, things will vest for 4 years, and we're looking to raise 100 million. Again, might seem like a crazy amount, but when you divide it amongst 128 currently, and the next few years, it might be up to 150. Hopefully, it doesn't get too much larger than 200 members, but once you divide these values, and if you start to take into context of the broader ecosystem, the sort of competitive incentives that may be pulling people in certain directions, it starts to balance out. So yeah, 4-year vest post-pilot, and we're hoping to raise 100 million. So, and I'm really excited to hopefully have EthStaker along for the ride for part of that.
That's interesting. My first thought is like 100 million. What, thinking about our community, it immediately makes me wonder like what our potential share of that could be. It's something worth taking some time to think, because I love setting goals. Like, is it 1 million from EthStaker or from our community, or is it something like that? But it's a fun idea to kind of bat around for a while.
The other way I've been framing it is like, the EF does amazing work. It funds a lot of amazing projects, and there are many other organizations that do amazing funding. EthStaker runs their QF round, stuff like that. And this sort of metric that I've been thinking of is like, okay, what's the ratio of ecosystem funding of the core protocol versus, not to like, this is too generalized, but like versus what the EF funds. It's tens of millions every year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's I don't know, not going to put a number out there, but it's a significant chunk. And I think we should at minimum try to meet that amount that the EF is putting into the ecosystem. The ecosystem should be, trying to, that should be the aspirational goal.
Yeah.
Though I don't have a catchy name for this metric yet, but I'm sure we'll think of one.
I think I can make it catchy. So I think like 1% is like a good like rough ballpark for like what projects and like communities should contribute. So like so like if you're launching a product with like a new token, I think 1% of the supply is like not a huge like part of it, and it does make a difference. And I think if you think of it as like as an individual staker, it's like setting 1% to Protocol Guild is probably like, you should feel like you've like done it, right? Like you don't like owe, like you don't have like a debt or anything. And I mean, you're not obliged to do it. But I think like if we can get the ecosystem to donate about 1% of like the value created or captured, Protocol Guild will be more than fine, and we'll be in a spot where like the equilibrium between like the risk adjusted like compensation to work on the protocol versus like the application layer will be in a good spot. So I think if you want to think in terms of like what's like actionable and what's like a good goal, it's like, I think 1% is basically the level that is very valuable.
Yeah, I really see a narrative around this that is kind of encouraging stakers to give 1% back. And so many stakers are return focused. And I really imagine that 1% as an investment in the people developing the protocols who bring value to ETH. And that's kind of that cyclical effect that you give 1%, you enable teams to hire more developers, to be better staffed, and that reward comes back to you through the strength of Ethereum. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's 1%. In the context of stakers, I think it's like of the rewards, right? Not of the principal. So yeah, it's not like your APY goes from 4 to 3% or 7 to 6%.
1%.
But it's like it's like 1% of the 7%. Yeah.
Right.
While we have you guys here, there's something really exciting coming up that
hold up. We got some. Can we stop that for a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go. You're fine.
The chat still that I'd like to.
I'm sorry.
But still about the protocol guild. So one is, how does vesting work for projects like Aquila that stop development? Does the contract support prorated vesting?
So in terms of curation, if Aquila wasn't removed, it would mean a failure of the curation mechanism. And as
yeah, I'll push. So Aquila is like the weird level. No, but I think Aquila is like the weird level to think of this at, because like Protocol Guild is focused on the people, not like the projects, right? Like, so I don't know how many developers there were from Aquila and Protocol Guild. I think like
just
3
one.
or 4.
Just one.
Oh, there's just one. Okay. So this is maybe a weird example, because if there's one person and that person is going to stop working on the protocol, then yes, we should remove them. But if we have like, imagine like a more general version of this, like Aquila's entire team was part of Protocol Guild. There's like 4 of them. If like 3 out of 4 keep working on the protocol, whether that's like, they move on to Aragon, they move to like, I don't know, Nethermind or whatever, like we should keep those individuals in. I think it's really important that like the link is at the person level, not the project. So like Aquila shutting down, if everybody working on it goes away, then yeah, they'll all be removed in the next update. But if like most of the people move to something else, this is kind of a really neat thing at Protocol Guild, where like it gives the individuals more power. And you can imagine this is kind of neat because like say Consensus became evil, right? And all of the people working on Besu and Teku at Consensus left Consensus, but they still wanted to work on Ethereum. We would want to support them through the Protocol Guild and be this thing where we're like, okay, like, hey Ben, like we like your work and you should not be kicked out of Protocol Guild. Sorry, Trent, I know I cut you off. Yeah.
That's a good summary, yeah.
And the second question that Trent pointed out is, what's the difference between the pilot vesting contract and the split contract?
The vesting contract holds the funds before they get sent to individuals. So it's just like kind of a waiting room while it vests. So it sits above the vesting or the split contract itself, where all the funds live. Nothing really happens there. So we're not like managing it as a treasury or anything. It just sits in this contract, and then when it's vested, you can poke it to distribute down into the split contract itself, which is what the what I've been referring to as like the registry or the on-chain record of the membership and the weights that are associated with them. So they're 2 different contracts, but they operate more like one.
Got it. Okay, I think then we can move to, Fizz just had to go for a second, so I'll just grab this greedily. Let's go to KCG. So we're all super excited about Ethereum scaling. That's of course interesting from the user perspective. And there's something upcoming called the KZG, and you can explain in a minute what that is, which will help with this scaling. How can stakers participate, and what does it do to Ethereum, the protocol, when they do participate?
Sure. So this refers to the KZG ceremony, which is by another name, a trusted setup, which you may have heard of. Zcash did the most famous one, where a bunch of people come together, produce randomness, share it amongst each other, and run computation on it. And that it outputs a random number. Ethereum is doing a trusted setup for proto-dank sharding, also known as EIP 4844. And we're getting to the point where we're starting to broadcast this to people, build awareness, because These trusted setup ceremonies are most credible when they have a really large number of participants from a bunch of different communities, and we hope that EthStaker individuals will participate. Not a ton of lift on your end. If you do want to participate in this thing, generates some randomness. You will just go to either a website or a CLI that you can run yourself. But the Ethereum Foundation will be running an interface, so you'll just go there. Takes a few minutes, if that, and you will be part of the ceremony and contributing randomness. But that will be, we're hoping to kick it off in January. It'll run for a couple months of the public contribution period, so don't worry about like missing a window. There's no queue to sign up for. You don't have to get a token. You just show up on the website, you'll sit in a lobby, and then this sequencer server will pull you out of it.
All right, let me give you this softball, Trent.
Sure.
So it's a trusted ceremony, and yet we want Ethereum to be trustless. So how many of the KCG participants have to be honest and trustworthy?
Sure, I'll knock it out of the park. Just one. The phrasing is like in crypto, verify, don't trust. But if you have to trust, here's the extension. If you have to trust somebody, trust only yourself. So it really only needs one honest participant. We could have 99,000 evil individuals and a single honest participant who gives good randomness and doesn't keep their secret around, and it would be completely secure. And that's super important because this is what layer 2s are going to be building their proofs on and helping us to scale in the future. So
can I just say that cryptographic math looks like more like black magic to me.
It is.
Outside.
It definitely is. You're not wrong.
I was talking to somebody about ZK today, and I'm like, whoa, that's magic. That's not real stuff that anyone can understand. It's all magic. Hey, so for this trusted setup ceremony, Trent had mentioned a goal of 10,000 people, and the reason that I'm talking about it now is because I like that goal, and I'm really invested in supporting that success. And I know we have about 10,000 validators, or I'm sorry, node operators on the Ethereum beacon chain, and those are people who put at least 32 Ether in, and so that's a pretty high bar. And the bar for the trusted ceremony is literally like 2 minutes in your browser. So this is just an awareness campaign. It's kind of like getting people comfortable with the idea that this is going to happen in a few months, and when it does show up, you recognize it instead of glossing over it. And so I think we're going to blow away that 10,000 and maybe go much higher.
We hope it'll be, many tens of thousands. But this would, even at 10,000, this would be the largest summoning ceremony of this kind to date. So we're aiming there, but I'm confident we can definitely exceed it.
Yeah, I can't wait. It'll be a fun challenge.
All right, we're gonna wrap up the call. I believe that Amvetica dropped the POAP link in the YouTube chat. So if you want a POAP, I have heard there are some issues with maybe the POAP getting sent. So if that's the case, we'll figure it out. We have a couple of calls coming up next month, Scale 3, Safe Stake. We have a public calendar link that you can subscribe to so that you can add that to your Google Calendar or your iMac calendar or whatever you use. The URL for it is tinyurl.com/eStaker calendar. So you can put that in your browser and it'll subscribe you. Thank you, Trent and Tim, for coming and explaining Protocol Guild to us and KZG ceremony and for everything that you guys are doing.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This was fun.
Great to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.